Welcome, YouTube family, to episode 5 of this most recent series, Non-Acceptance to Love, in which we are going to talk about something very, very important, which is how to live the magic in the mundane. A phrase you might have heard of, and maybe you already have associations of what that means and what that looks like, and that's awesome. And in this video, we are going to dive real deep. I'm going to give you a bunch of lists that I have written in my own reflections about this, so lots of juicy things to come. But before we get started, let me paint a picture for you. So I invite you to imagine this with me, okay? So, scene. Your alarm goes off. Let's say it's 6 a.m. It's a Monday morning. The whole structure of another week of work rolls out in front of you. And this all happens within seconds. And autopilot tempts you. So you're in that vibe, right? You're dreaming of an elsewhere. Anywhere but here, and then I'll be happy, says the inner dialogue. Always projecting that the grass is always greener, but never arriving to this grass, which is supposedly or convincingly greener. What is up with that? Rigged system. So multiply that energy by 365 days. Then multiply that energy by 5 years. Who is that person? Ooh, you feel that? Yeah, me too. It's heavy, right? There feels like if it was a color, it'd be gray. Okay, so we'll just put that to the side. And now I want you to imagine something different. Scene. Your alarm goes off. It's a Monday morning. The structure of another week of work rolls out in front of you, and autopilot tempts you. Same but different. You catch yourself projecting of a grass is always greener, future elsewhere situation. Anywhere but here. However, you do exactly that. You catch yourself. You compassionately smile at this part of you, and you don't judge yourself. Instead, you bring your attention to what is here and what is now. You bring your attention to the sunlight softly and subtly coming through your window. You bring your attention to that beautiful shadow that the leaves outside the window impress upon the window. And all of this takes place within just seconds. That feeling recognizes that you have big dreams. And you remind yourself that everything you are doing now, that week of work that's rolling out in front of you, or those weeks of work, but it's in context. You know that you are setting your foundation up in order to fulfill your longer term dreams, the path of purpose, which is your life, which is the discovery of you and your soul and your essence. And in doing that, you cultivate gratitude for the little things, like the sunlight. Maybe it's raining outside. Maybe you can feel a sense of gratitude that you are putting in that effort for yourself and your future now. And now multiply that feeling, that energy, by 365 days. Now extrapolate that over 5 years. Who is that person? Totally different. We had this guy over here, this guy over here. They're doing the same things hypothetically, but radically different as well. You feel that? Good. So living in the magic of the mundane is actually becoming very simply the act of being, the act of living, and how we go about doing that. Less about the what, more about the how. And that shift from living the magic in the mundane to being on autopilot becomes accessible to you, to me, to anyone who is willing to pay attention to the little moments, to the details. It's available to those of us who don't consistently project that happiness, that magic, that whatever it is only in accompaniment with high achievements and peak moments, right? It makes things kind of simple. And maybe that's like, but that's kind of boring. And to that part of self who is so attached to the achievements, and it's not its fault, that's the conditioning. But to that part, for sure, watching the sunlight coming through the window, that's boring. But to the other part, the part that is not about the peak, the part that is about longevity and satisfaction, to that part, it knows that that is everything. Because that micro moment of shifting our attention to just that instead of the doom and the gloom extrapolates to everything. How you live your days is how you live your life. This is a quote which came to me some years ago, and I don't actually recall who said it. I probably will look that up. However, these words are key, so I'm going to say them again. How you live your days is how you live your life. The micro, the day, reflects the macro, life. Because the how you live your day reflects how you approach life. You see? Massive implications. So, in this magical video, there are 3 parts that I'm going to guide you through. The first part of the video is going to be about how to be a conscious pattern breaker. Not in an unconscious sense, right? Because it's conscious pattern breaking. I'm going to speak about the nuance there. And this is so that you fight the autopilot. And there I'm going to give you some juicy lists that I wrote for you. Part 2 of this video is acknowledging the personhood of all things, which is the cornerstone of an animist ethic. And I'm going to bridge that with living the magic in the mundane. Key. And then I'm going to lead us into prioritizing creativity as normality in body, mind, heart, and spirit. Because creativity is not just for the exclusive people who were born with natural talent. Like, no. Creativity is creative energy, is life force, is everything. So we're going to talk about that. Sounds good? Yes. I know. I'm excited. So let's begin, shall we? Let us first define what is the magic and what is the mundane. So, mundane. This is characterized by the practical, the transitory, the ordinary. And therefore, it's often associated with things that aren't very interesting, like going to work and taking public transport and cleaning the house and tending to the family and pruning the garden and whatever it is, right? Ordinary. Commonplace. That's the common definition of mundane. Magic. Maybe an image of Gandalf comes into your head. Or Harry Potter, and wands, and spells, and a crystal ball. Cool. Yes, that's magic. Though the magic that I'm talking about is also as a craft, so to speak, a set of techniques through which practitioners or people who want to live a more magical life creatively shape their relationships with the world and with their own self. So, to translate that, magic is shifting and creatively shaping your relationship with self and the world. Hello, most of us are magicians already from that definition. And really, actually, I won't go into it in this video, but that is beyond the scope of this video. But I will say this. We have this really like elusive sort of far off definition of magic. And actually, when you really get to the juice of the 3 phases of magic and the 3 definitions of magic, we're doing magic all the time. Fascinating. Okay, little seed, not going into it in this video. But essentially, we are dual citizens that reside both in the spiritual and earthly realm, aka in matter and in spirit, so to speak. And it's our job, really, to recognize the magic in our everyday lives. Because that's what we are also. We're not just the physical. Like, thoughts and feelings, they're not physical, but they exist, right? And we channel them. So we exist in the non-earthly realm as well. And recognizing the magic in the mundane, so to speak, is us recognizing more of the totality of who we are, actually. And we can do that in so many ways, and I'm going to give you lists. But for example, through ritual, through play, through an ethic of animism and relationality, through a devotion to seeing things with fresh eyes, right? To expressing and honoring gratitude, right? There's really no question that, for example, me, I'm a fallible human being, okay? I'm subject to the wear and tear of time, just like you. To live the magic in the mundane does not mean that you stop being what you are, which is a finite expression of the infinite. It's okay. You're allowed to have good days and less good days, and feeling messy and chaotic, and then being in structure and feeling focused. Like, full permission to be you. And full permission also to expand that sense of you and live a more meaningful life by expanding your perceptions, right? Also, to live the magic in the mundane doesn't necessarily mean that the mundane kind of stops, right? The day-to-day components of our life are mostly mundane by that definition, even monotonous, right? They're kind of doing the same thing, going through the motions. And that doesn't need to just radically stop, and you just need to flee to the Himalayas and that's it. Okay, I mean, I fully support travel, oh my God. But for the sake of longevity of living the magic in the mundane, we must live the magic in the mundane, right? And recognize that where magic ends and mundane begins, they're not distinct, okay? That's a false binary, which we're going to get into. So, being a pattern breaker, a conscious pattern breaker. What does that mean? Well, for sure, you decide. And let me distinguish that in two parts. So, we have pattern breaking. The word break, for me, kind of has like it's like a kind of polarizing word. You know, breaking feels destructive, it feels violent. Comes with like the saying, break down to break through, so kind of nice. And for sure, there is a shadow of pattern breaking, which is kind of like the rebel without a cause, you know, just like burn the bridges and break this thing and move on, don't care, leave a trail and fire behind me. So there's that part of it, but in this video, I'm not exactly speaking to that. What I'm speaking about when I say conscious pattern breaking is, okay, I'll give an example. Let's say you are a painter and you work with the medium primarily of acrylic paint. The pattern breaking comes in where you consciously decide that without dishonoring your time invested in painting, but you're going to try out pastels. Maybe you're going to try soft pastels and oil pastels, but you're going to give a fair trial to pastels. And so you're quote unquote breaking the pattern of the medium which you usually use, which is just acrylic paint. So the breaking actually then opens up the space for emerging of the acrylic with the pastel to create something new. In conscious pattern breaking, you learn to add, to subtract, to combine ultimately. Other words to illustrate this is like development and refinement, right? A sense of expansion and contraction, development, refinement, right? And so the unconscious form of breaking is more like just the throwing it in the bin. Well, I've moved on to pastels now, screw the acrylics, you know? It sort of feels a bit reckless and even disrespectful because you're disrespecting the previous rung of the ladder, the sacred building block of your past. Okay, so we don't want to disrespect them. Like, We want to honor the sacred building blocks of our path. We want to honor the previous rung on the ladder, which has allowed us to step onto the next rung of the ladder, right? So that's where the conscious pattern breaking can come in. Another part of this conscious pattern breaking is what I can call pattern phasing. So this speaks to how we are cyclical beings. Like, the seasons aren't just out there. We live the seasons. We also are the seasons. In micro, right, zoomed in, and in macro, zoomed out. For example, if you are a woman, your pattern, your cycle is 28 days, okay? Don't quote me on this, but they say the man cycle is more actually within 24 hours. So what a woman can kind of go through in 28 days, a man refreshes every 24 hours. So that could be true, that could be false, but just illustrating the example of the cyclical nature of us as beings. We also have days, right, where we have lower energy within that cycle. We might have months where we have lower energy because we're in our personal winter, so to speak, which may not correlate with the actual season of winter, versus being in our season of summer. Like, things are flowing, things are moving, projects are happening, but someone else might be in their winter or their autumn, right? So pattern phasing is really interesting because we learn to just attune to what our cycle is. Where are we on our cycle? And that's massive empowerment. Like, whoa, no one is giving you a template that's going to magically work for you. Like, you are learning you. And that's a very deep and intimate relationship with self, which is beautiful. That's massive relationality. And in that, there's a surrender. In that, there is a pattern breaking of the autopilot, so to speak, because you learn to phase between what you're working with. For example, we'll just use the example of artists. Let's say you're an artist and you recognize some of those days where you have lower energy. So you assign different tasks for yourself that correlate with your energy capacity. So you don't just ditch everything, right? You don't just throw everything in the bin, but you work with what you've got. For example, let's say, actually, I'll use this example of filming a video. So I'm filming a video right now for you, okay? So hi. Let's say today I'm more of a higher energy, whereas the lower energy, I may be preparing the notes for this video, reading articles, collating quotes, writing my own notes, right? Where it's less of an outward and more of a like within, dreaming, visioning, working with that sort of lower, more introverted energy, and then the extroverted energy. I'm like, okay, let's go film. So that's what I'm kind of touching on when I'm speaking to pattern phasing. And I don't have a template for you other than it being an invitation for you to just ask yourself, does that feel true for me? Is there a traceable even pattern of days in the month where my energy tends to be a little lower, tends to be a little higher, or am I pretty consistent? Cool. Just notice. That's amazing. That is already consciously pattern breaking the autopilot, yeah? And that is also a massive way to live the magic in the mundane. So, exciting. We're going to move on to the first list that I have for you. This is 12 examples of what I personally do. And then I'm going to give you a more general list of examples which overlap with what I do, but also some other things. To live the magic in the mundane, woven with being a conscious pattern breaker, okay? So, what I do is I express at least 3 gratitudes with every meal that I eat. And if I'm alone, I may do that internally. And if I'm with others, I will invite them to also express gratitudes. They don't have to if they don't want to, but I will outwardly express those gratitudes. And so this is a really awesome time where things do sort of feel like they can quiet a moment, where the autopilot of like, do the food, eat the food, move on, quietens. And there's a moment of reflection. And there's a moment of coming into the heart and really asking myself, what am I actually grateful for right now? And maybe I've had a crappy day and I feel like stubborn and I don't want to express those gratitudes, but I do. And there is always something that I'm grateful for. And sometimes it surprises me what the depth of something that I am grateful for. And sometimes it's really simple, like I'm grateful for the rain today. Or I'm grateful for vacuums. Like, shout out to vacuums. You make cleaning really fun and easy. Or I'm really grateful for the meta lesson that I'm going through of learning how to surrender and attune to my heart and allow love in rather than being in defense all the time, right? So it can be whatever's present, whatever's alive, but an invitation, okay? So that's one of the things that I do. And it also, I will say this as well, it is also a really nice time to also give awareness to the food that I'm about to eat. I'm aware of these beautiful plants and these grains and these seeds and the beans, some eggs, and I'm like, wow, like all the things that made this bowl in front of me, this meal in front of me possible. A blessing to all the hands, to all the beings that made this possible, you know. Consciousness, magical. The second thing that I like to do is if I'm in busier times of my life, I schedule in free time. So that might sound counterintuitive of like scheduling in free time, but that's the way that it works, especially in busier times. Otherwise, it just gets filled with something else. So this can look like what Julia Cameron calls the artist date, where you actually schedule in once a week time to take yourself on an artist date, which works with the inner child as well. And you do something creative, or you go to the gallery, you do something that you don't usually do. And why I say scheduling in free time is it creates a crucible, because you're creating a container of time. And that container of time can stoke the fires of your imagination and curiosity. For me personally, it really does that because it's giving me a conscious container of time in which anything can happen, right? There's no fixed thing that needs to happen. And it feels very held because it is an agreed upon amount of time. And it's almost like I'm so more aware and present because I know that it's for this amount of time. You know, like when you go travel somewhere and you know you're only in this place for a month, right? Or a week or 6 months, but the awareness of the container makes every moment more magical, more rich somehow, because you're not taking it for granted, because you know that there's an end coming, so to speak, right? So that's that. Another thing that I do, which is really important to me, is I pay attention, very close attention, to the beauty that surrounds me. Even if I'm in an urban jungle, even if it's not somewhere I'd usually call beautiful, yet this allows me to see that beauty really is everywhere. It just is a reflection of my definition of beauty, the depth of the definition, so to speak. And sometimes that beauty can look like the beauty of the act of someone, right? Feeling their heart so present in that act. The beauty of this one little plant, you know, in the room. And the beauty of how it's there, it's growing, it's allowing me to appreciate it right now. Simple. Or even the beauty of cloud TV, as I like to call it, looking up into the sky and seeing the clouds go past and inviting that sense of awe and like, wow, what is even a cloud, you know? Like just that appreciation, it shakes off the haze of, oh, I already know what this is, put it in a box, move it away. So that's really key and really important for me. The fourth thing that I do is I attune to the aliveness of everything around me, the consciousness of the room. Okay, so what does that mean? I know you've felt it, where you've walked into a particular room and you can just feel like a stillness, or you feel maybe like a heaviness. Like sometimes you walk into a room, you're like, bad juju here. Okay, that's the consciousness of the room and the imprints that have happened in the room as well that you're picking up on, so kind of a separate thing. But what I'm speaking to is more the animate quality. I recognize the consciousness present within all things. the consciousness even of the room itself. Like, yo, this is the room where stuff happens. Like, hey, room where stuff happens, what's up? I appreciate the consciousness of the salt lamp and the gift that it gives to the room, the warmth, the connection to the elements through the salt, right? It just brings something very organic into the space, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the consciousness of the trees outside, attuning to their own unique energy, because they're different. You know, I could just lump them into the category of tree, but that would just be like lumping you and me into the category of human and not recognizing the nuance of us, right? So there is appreciation there too. Appreciation of the consciousness of the animate force that we call wind, element of air, within and without. So it's everything and anything, but just some examples there. I will go into animism, which that is a cornerstone, what I'm speaking to right there in the second part of this video. Another thing I do is weave in spontaneity within structure. So chaos within order, so to speak. That could look like scheduling in the free time, right? Another thing that I do is bringing structure within spontaneity. Okay, so let's say I am doing something a little more spontaneous, but the structure is held within a particular theme or purpose. Micro example could be, let's say I am improv moving, I'm dancing, right? There's a sort of chaos there, I'm in a sort of dance thing, and then the structure is I'm going through different phases in the dance, different movements. I'm attuning to the theme of moving like water or something. So there is structure within the spontaneity. And that limit, so to speak, paradoxically opens up to a very unique kind of creativity. So that definitely feels like extrapolating the magic in the mundane, so to speak. And the tension between the polarities of the chaos and the order is where the restlessness resides, like what I spoke to in the last video. The restlessness being a universal force of evolution, of creativity. So, totally that. Another thing that I do, which is number 7 on this list, is I make a point of connecting with less human-altered neighborhoods. Even if that's a lusher park, if I'm not directly close to a larger body of nature, I'll make a point of driving to the river. It's a beautiful part of the river that's surrounded by big eucalyptus trees and cockatoos, and it's just so magical there for me. I really connect with this part of the land. Where I was living for a while, like, it was easier to kind of go out, and there was kangaroos everywhere and cockatoos, and just making a point of connecting with that, not taking that for granted, of allowing my nervous system to attune to the less human-altered neighborhoods. Hiking on Saturdays was a thing I was doing for a while, going to different spots and just being in that ecosystem and just feeling how downregulated I got so quick and how attentive I was to what was around me, how my senses were so activated and perceptive, you know, of seeing everything and feeling everything and smelling everything. So that is huge, absolutely huge for me. Number 8 on my list is getting up early to revel in the hours before most people are awake, which inherently feels more magical to me. This is not a thing that I do like all the time. Sometimes when I wake up, it tends to be a little bit later when the sun is already up, and other phases where I do feel a lot more like energized. I'm going to sleep good, I'm sleeping well, as I'm going to sleep at good times and sleeping really well, and I've got a solid practice, like getting up early. It's just like, whoa, it's so quiet. It's the sort of energy where I don't want to even put on a light. Like, I want candles. I want the salt lamp, you know. And I won't jump into something straight away. I'll just revel in that energy, maybe do some journaling, and then I'll move into some practice, right? But that time for me is really magical. It's less functional, but I also find that the later in the night hours are also that kind of magic, when most of the people are asleep and the energy just feels very quiet. That's also a very magical time. And sometimes my creativity is just like, whoa, let's do it. I'm like, now, like I gotta go to sleep, man. Have you experienced that too? So yes, there's definitely magic in that. On a day-to-day level, literally, if I'm doing a lot of sitting down work, getting up and doing some intuitive movement to break up the stillness. And that is a massive conscious pattern breaking, because it is so easy just to sit and keep going and get into this monotonous like flow, so to speak. But I do feel that my mind becomes less sharp, and it actually takes me a lot longer to do a thing compared to if I broke the pattern consciously, got up, did some movement, did some shaking, right? In Qigong, like the clean body, really great. Honestly, just shaking is amazing. And that intuitive movement, just refresh. So that's key. What I also like to do to be a conscious pattern breaker and thereby weaving the magic in the mundane is consciously using my non-dominant hand for things, like brushing my teeth or my hair or opening jars or moving items or vacuuming, whatever it is, but just breaking the autopilot by consciously using my non-dominant hand. And it feels like I have to put in extra effort because that pathway isn't as fired, so to speak, though it just shifts things. You're like, oh, hey, oh my God, thank you so much. Why do you do it all the time? You know? There was actually a workshop where we were invited to, with our non-dominant hand, like massage our dominant hand. And that was amazing. That felt really magical, of just like giving love from this hand, which normally gets to chill out, and massaging my right hand and just being like, oh my God, you do so much work for me. Like, thank you so much. And just feeling this deep love and appreciation for my right hand, my left hand, and by extension, my entire body, which is doing so many things, a gazillion cells doing a bunch of things, allowing my organs to keep going, my blood to keep pumping, my heart to keep beating without me even having to think about it. Amazing. That feels magic in and of itself. So number 11 on my list is consciously including variety. Variety is the spice of life, as they say, and there's total truth to that. That variety can look like literally different spices on the food. Like I just get into things and I kind of just stick with it until I get sick of it. So this is something I might try to just not do, because it maybe bring in some more variety. But for example, like I'll just go through a period of like, I'm just obsessed with curry powder. Like, let me just put curry powder on everything. And then it'll shift, and then it'll be more like paprika and cumin and turmeric and cinnamon mixed together as a whole thing. And anyway, so the variety can come in literally just by spicing it up differently, you know, every day maybe, not just waiting for a month and then I get sick of it. So there's that. But the variety is also consciously doing things that are different than what I usually do. That could be something small, like driving a different route to the same place. It could look like listening to different music actively, or not listening to music at all if I usually was listening to music at that period of time. It could look like going to different events, to different workshops, okay? It can look like if I've been reading a lot of like nonfiction, I will read fiction, okay? Just spicing it up. Bringing in colors into what I'm eating, colors into my life, plants into the rooms, right? Flowers for the house. Like if there's been a lot of noise, being in silence. If there's been a lot of silence, bringing in noise, okay? It's just that variety. It can look very different depending on where I'm at, but there are some examples. So variety is a spice of life. And the 12th thing on my list is connecting with the sacred. This is a massive conscious pattern breaking for me, particularly because of the more atheist, materialist paradigm that I grew up in. And the sacred for me, my relationship with that, with the divine, with source consciousness, was something I really had to consciously work with and work on. And it's evolved organically for sure, because that is part of my essence. It wasn't something I had to like laboriously sort of chip away at, but it is a conscious decision, because that wasn't the norm, so to speak. That wasn't the autopilot. That wasn't the default. And connecting with the sacred looks many different ways for me. It looks like the work that I do as well when I'm doing more of the spirit-based work. It can look like tending to my altars. It can look like the meditation practice that I have. Journey work. It can look like actually just living with an animist ethic. Like on my day-to-day life, moment to moment, I'm weaving with that. So it's not bound to a very specific thing, and it doesn't need to be this huge, big thing either. Like connecting with the sacred for me is a moment-to-moment thing. And that is something that I do need to tend to, because the autopilot is strong. The default paradigm is very strong. And so it is a conscious pattern-breaking decision that I do make and tend to. So that is that. That is my list of 12 that I personally do. So now I'm going to give you a more general list of 18 things that you can do to really live the magic in the mundane, like starting now. And some of these overlap with what I do as well. First things first, this is huge and key. Attune to the present moment through your senses. Through sight, through sound, through smell, through taste, through touch, and even the sense of thought. That is totally that. Because to live the magic in the mundane requires us being here now. How can we attune to anything magic here and now if we're constantly projecting ourselves into the future or into the past? Anywhere but here kind of thing, right? So the senses are a portal into the present moment. The body is a portal into the present moment. And that is something that does need to be tended to. Because that sense of thought, it can get very carried away into past, into future, right? But it can also be harnessed to come here and to be here, to focus in on here. So play with that. Start small. You are already hearing something. So really focus on hearing that thing. If you're chopping vegetables, really focus on just chopping those vegetables. If you are walking, really just focus on what it feels like to be walking. How it feels like to place your feet one after the other on the ground. How it feels to feel your legs moving and your muscles activating. How it feels to have the light breeze upon your skin, right? What are you looking at on this walk? Okay, you notice some thoughts. Whoop, bring them back. Harness the thought to focus on the sense. Okay? Simple as that. Very, very simple. Number 2 is to pay attention to the details that you usually overlook. Key. This could look like paying attention to the water droplets on the leaves outside your window after it's been raining. Or the way the morning sun feels upon your skin as you walk somewhere. Or paying attention to the smile on that person's face that you see across the street. Noticing how that smile makes you feel, and noticing the energy of that person who is smiling. that is a micro example of these details that you can pay attention to. Even right here, right now. Maybe you're sitting in a room that you know very, very well. Or maybe you're driving. Either way, regardless of where you are, let's say you're driving and maybe you've driven on that road before. What is something that you usually overlook that you could just pay attention to right now? Maybe when you're driving, you never pay attention to, for sure, focus on driving, yeah? But maybe you can also pay attention to how your hands feel on the steering wheel. Or maybe you can pay attention to, wow, I actually feel really in a flow state when I drive. Cool, just notice. Or let's say you're sitting in the room, which you know, back to front maybe. But even still, you can appreciate something. You can pay attention to even how the light quality is in your room right now. You can pay attention to how, I really like that piece of art up on the wall. And bringing that appreciation, maybe you notice something different. Because the you who was looking at that art is different than the you that looked at that art 2 days ago. Because you're always changing. And even in noticing that, brings in the magic in the mundane, because you stop seeing things as stagnant and the same and fixed, and you stop seeing yourself as stagnant or the same or fixed, or others. Yeah? Totally magic. Number 3 on this list is orienting your mind to pay attention to what is positive, to what is kind, to what is beautiful, instead of living in a perpetual state of negativity bias, which is honestly what we've been programmed to do. That could look like being in the supermarket, and instead of paying attention to, oh my God, I hate being in the supermarket, oh my God, this huge industry, they're exploiting all of these farmers and consumerism and capitalism, like, cool, all of that exists, all of that is valid. And you can still decide to pay attention to what is positive and kind and beautiful in that environment. And maybe that looks like, whoa, these people who are walking in the same aisle as me, they are smiling and giggling and they're exuding a beautiful energy. I can appreciate that. Or you look at the colors of all the fruits and vegetables and you're like, I can appreciate that. You can appreciate the fact that you can go buy food from the supermarket. Okay, not everyone is in that position. That's positive and kind and beautiful. So try that. Micro changes make macro changes. Number 4 on my list here for you guys is to create sanctuary. Have you ever been to a new place, you've just moved, and you kind of don't feel like this is your forever place? You might only be there for 6 months. And there's a sort of feeling that comes with that of like, well, I could invest a lot of energy into making this space nice, but what's the point? I'm leaving anyway. My invitation there is to create sanctuary anyway. Even if you've been in the same house for like 20 years, 10 years, 3 years, and you've kind of created a thing, cool. Take a moment and reflect on, do I resonate with the space? Do I feel inspired in my own space? Do I feel relaxed in my own space? And creating sanctuary, regardless of how long you're there for, gives yourself permission to also embrace, for sure, the impermanence of everything, but for that not to be a reason for you to not create magic, for you to not create something that does open your heart and your mind. Why not bring in beautiful plants? Why not find some beautiful secondhand fabric and turn that into curtains? Why not bring in a fun carpet? Why not bring in a different color of paint upon the wall? Like, why not? Bring in candles. It doesn't have to be big, yeah. It can be, like, go for it, but it doesn't also have to be. What are the things that allow you to feel like you have created your own sanctuary? I know for me, a massive key is literally a salt lamp. Like, that feels like a cornerstone of sanctuary for me. And for sure, having plants. They could be dried plants, like a lot of dried, beautiful Australian natives. I love having them around. When I'm going on walks, I'm picking up feathers if they cross my path, and I put them places. Just over time, making a space feel really nice. And that is a conscious effort as well, because it is easy to, right, get caught up in the autopilot and do the things that you need to do and not prioritize that as a thing. And my invitation is for you to make that an important thing for you. Even if it's just working on it 2 hours every weekend if you don't have much time, but make it a thing. You'll be so grateful for it, because you'll actually feel like, oh yeah, I'm coming home, and that feels really nice. Even if you're in a share house, you can still create sanctuary in your room. You can talk to your roommates about how you can make the living space more inviting and warm and cozy and creative. So it's also still a beautiful form of connection too. You can attune to the subtle. So this is number 5 on this list, and that is a invitation to distance ourselves from the default program, which is materialism. Attunement to the subtle is like what I said before, of attuning to the consciousness of a room, of an item of clothing, of a plant, the energy of the forest, the energy of your bedroom, the energy that a candle creates, the salt lamp, the plants, right? This is a cornerstone of animism. And in that attunement to the subtle, even attuning to how you feel, right? If we're in the hustle and the bustle, we're in autopilot, it can be very easy to also dissociate from how we're feeling in our body, what is actually going on. Attunement to the subtle can be the difference of just blindly saying yes, or actually taking a second, tuning in, and actually being able to bring through an embodied no. Attunement to the subtle is on a physical, mental, emotional, energetic level. You can, as number 6 on this list, cultivate an animist worldview to be a conscious pattern breaker and to attune to the magic in the mundane. So key. More on that in part 2 of this video. Number 7 is you can create a daily or weekly or monthly ritual. So let's say, for example, on a daily level, getting up early before others are awake to journal with a candle or to meditate. Or maybe that daily ritual is to pull a card for the day from your oracle deck, from your tarot, from some other deck that you have. And pulling a card to represent the energy of the day. Like, what's the vibe that I'm going for today? Or what's something that I need to be aware of for today? But just pulling that card every day. Or maybe your daily ritual is literally you get up, you take a bit of water, you go outside, you receive some natural sunlight, and that's your daily ritual. Or your daily ritual's having a cup of cacao. Great. Full permission for you to decide what that is. But the ritual aspect of it is how much consciousness you infuse in that thing. It's easy to also autopilot our daily things. Okay, pick the card. Yep, cool, go outside. Great. Or, okay, what's my energy for the day? Pick the card. Okay, I'm making my beautiful cacao. Hey, cacao. Yay, love you. Drinking cacao, Totally different. On a more like weekly/monthly basis, setting intentions and seeding intentions with the new moon, or setting intentions of release for the full moon, scheduling a weekly hike, okay, as ritual, expressing daily gratitudes with the meals, right? That's also a ritual of sorts. So there are a gazillion ways to bring in ritual. These are just some examples to help you be inspired to create your own rituals. And don't be scared by the word ritual, okay? Doesn't mean big and fancy and you need all the things ever. It can be simple. It can be literally what you're already doing, but just woven in with a bit more consciousness. Number 8 on this list is living in alignment with nature's cycles and rhythms. This reactivates an ancient knowing encoded in our blood and in our bones. That is so magical. It's like remembering an ancient way, remembering what has always been. Living in alignment with the natural cycles and rhythms is like what I spoke to about the pattern phasing. You recognize that you are a cyclical being, as above, so below, as within, so without. As the cycles and the seasons exist around you, they exist within you. You recognize that the new moon is more for a time of seeding intentions, and you recognize that the full moon is more for releasing, for planting, for cutting hair, whatever it is. And the cycles as well of the solstice and the equinox, like what are the energy of those times? How can I also align beginning my projects with those times, or transitioning out of something or ending something and really honoring that? Yeah, so that feels really magic, but actually it's interesting because it's so natural, right? There's nothing like otherworldly about it. It's so natural and yet magical. Number 9 on this list here is to bring in the elements. So, for example, bringing in the elements can look like, let's say you have a whole day working on a computer. You can bring in the element of fire by having a candle next to you. Okay? And what that also does is brings in the natural version of that element. Because on the screen, we're kind of working with a processed version of that element. We could call that false fire. And then you have the candle next to you, which is true fire. And you're able to just get a bit of perspective, like, okay, there's this, it's amazing, it's helping me do my thing, I love it, great. And don't get lost, know what this comes from. Know the foundation. So candles are great for that. You can bring in the element of earth, maybe in your home, bringing in plants, bringing in flowers, even in your workplace. Gift yourself a work plant. Tend to that plant. To represent the element of air, incense, feathers. To represent the element of water, having, even if you can get those little mini water things, they like create the sound of running water. That's super nice. But it doesn't have to be that fancy. It can literally just have a bowl of water and placing a flower in it. Or having shells somewhere. Maybe something blue. Yeah. So, bring in the elements. You can create relationships with things that you'd otherwise deem as inanimate. Say hey to your car. Name your car if you want to. I've named my car, it's great. You can say hey to the trees outside your house. You can say hey to your house. You can say hey to the birds in the morning. Okay? It might feel weird, it might feel silly, but soon enough you will feel them respond in an acknowledgement of you, acknowledging them. You will feel their aliveness. You will feel your aliveness reflected back to you through them. And that won't feel unnatural or silly. That will feel the most natural. You feel connected. You feel more love with that state of consciousness. Number 11 on this list here is to invite play into your life. A playful attitude to bring balance to maybe a usually very serious attitude. Play. That can look like a million things. So let that brew. Number 12 on this list is to read, watch, listen to inspiring things. Music, books, art, videos like this, other videos. Music that you have listened to before, you haven't. Right? Paying attention to the shape of the music, the texture of the music, how the music makes you feel. Or listening to, or reading these books and just being like, wow, like I'm learning new things, like this is so inspiring. And by extension of that, number 13 on this list is to do things that inspire you as well. So all of the above from these lists, and attending workshops and events and exhibitions and nature adventures and road trips and sitting outside and paying attention to the beauty that's already there. Maybe even redecorating or rearranging things in your home, okay? Or you have all these cookbooks and you never look at them. So doing an inspiring thing and sitting down with that cookbook, making a cup of tea and deciding on the weekend, I'm going to make this recipe and I'm going to invite 3 of my beautiful friends and we're going to share this meal together. How inspiring. How beautiful. Number 14 is to make something with your own hands. This is so key and so magical. The baseline truth of reality is that it is infinite creativity. And when we make things with our own hands, like we get such a direct feedback response that we're doing a thing, and it is so satisfying. Be it pottery, be it weaving, crocheting, painting, carving, planting, constructing something with wood, whatever it is. That is so deeply satisfying, and it feels magical, and it feels like you're kind of moving away from the autopilot and just, oh, I can't do that or whatever. No. Make a thing with your hands. Realize your own infinite creative potential. 15 is to also own things made by hands and not machines. This is also key because if you also make things with your hands, you know the amount of energy that went into that. There is your energy, your time. You might have been listening to something inspiring, and so that's been woven into what you've created too. And then it's there, and you feel this beautiful soul just like exuding from it. Or if you have, I have a lot of beautiful friends who are potters. It's great. So I have their vessels that they've created, their cups, their mugs, and it's just different than an industrial machine created thing. Totally different. It actually feels sacred. That in and of itself feels sacred. That in and of itself feels like I want to create a ritual around that. I want to have my morning cacao in this cup, So own things made by hands. Plates, cups, tables, whatever. Jewelry. Number 16 is being aware of the giants upon whose shoulders you stand. Who is influencing you? Who is inspiring you? What is inspiring you? And how are they doing that? What do you do as a result of that? This is acknowledging the giants upon whose shoulders you stand. Because you realize that you are a product, so to speak, of the wide web of all existence. There is no you that doesn't exist in relation to all other things. You do exist in relation to all other things. So what are the things that allowed you to be who you are today? Maybe you've had amazing teachers. Maybe you are super inspired by particular people who you've come across in person or online, or an author. And that's inspired you to sit down and write, or that's inspired you to structure your time differently, or to bring in ritual, whatever it is. By extension, the giants upon whose shoulders you stand are your ancestors. There's no you without your ancestors, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on. Even just that shift in awareness, you're like, whoa. I am standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm also standing on the shoulders of the giant of this land. There's no me without this land. There's no me without Mama Nature. Totally magic perspective. And it allows you to contemplate self. Who am I? I realize that I am part of this web. And what that also does as being a conscious pattern breaker is shifts you out of just being apathetic and just accepting things which aren't in alignment with the truth of you. And that's a massive gift, for sure. That can get you out of relationships which don't serve you, which drain you and drag you down. With kindness, with compassion. That can get you out of a job which is just draining your life force. Okay? Like, cool, it served the purpose of allowing me to earn money. There's the necessity-based productivity, but I've totally ditched the wing of love-based productivity, right? That is spoken to in the video before this, so go check that out if you haven't already. So there's that, okay? Number 17 of this list is to offer gratitude. Make it generative. Acknowledge all the things around you that make your life possible. The light, the computer, the phone, the car, the food, the sun, the house, the people, your parents, whatever it is. Offer gratitude. And that makes it generative because love amplifies love. Appreciation amplifies appreciation. Nourishment amplifies nourishment. And is a link in from the previous one. Let's say you are super inspired by a particular author. The way that you can also nourish that connection and nourish that muse is to read more of their books. Maybe they have a blog. Read that. You know, bring your attention to it. Let yourself appreciate how much you love it by nourishing that connection, by reading that stuff. As another example, you can nourish the connection of, let's say you're painting with oils. An obvious example is to nourish the connection by painting with the oils, right? Because if you don't use it, you lose it, so to speak. Got to nourish that skill by tending to the skill, using the skill. But also, that gratitude extends to the paintbrushes. So you can nourish that by making sure you clean your brushes right. Yeah? You can nourish that by making sure that using the mineral terps to clean those brushes goes somewhere conscious. You don't just ditch it in the land, you know. That's also making it generative and conscious. And you're grateful for each step along the way. And also don't get neurotic about it. Some days you don't feel grateful. So then the lesson becomes seeing that you're not feeling grateful and not judging yourself. And then that opens you up, frees you up a little bit. And then, hey, maybe you might feel grateful. Number 18 on this list here for you is to cultivate a relationship with the divine. Attune to your soul, your higher guidance. Words that might resonate more with you is to Great Spirit, to Creator, to Source Consciousness, to God. Beyond any religion, beyond any dogma, to this whole thing we call reality. And this really helps cultivate a trust in the unknown, because when we can attune to the divine, we stop pretending like we can figure it all out. We stop pretending that we are everything. We recognize our limits. We recognize our flaws. We recognize that I only have access to like 3 steps above right now. I don't have access to 100 steps in front of me. And yet, I kind of feel like I get guided along the way. I kind of feel like things do always work out, even if the road is challenging and bumpy. But that awareness, that attunement allows you to feel held. That attunement allows you to recognize the essence and vibration of your soul, your heart. So, just that. So there you go. There are the things on this list. And yeah, may you feel inspired by these things on the list, because it might also inspire you, and I hope it does, to sit down and write your own list. What are 18, for example, 10 ways that you, can live the magic in the mundane? And maybe it is some things on the list that I wrote, or maybe it's completely different. And power to you. Okay? May you not take anything anyone says blind faith, blind trust. Your direct experience alone will make a thing true. Otherwise, it's just concept. It's ideology or belief. So try it out. You won't know if it works for you until you try it out. Okay, so make a point of it. And part of the aligned action of this video is for you to try out at least 3 of those things. So we'll get there. Okay, so we are at 1 hour already. I am kind of shocked that it took me this long to get through part 1. So what I'm going to do is move this, take part 5 of non-acceptance to love and make it 2 parts so as to allow this to be digestible. So we're going to end right here. You have now the list of 30 things, technically, of ways that you can live the magic in the mundane. And in the next part of this video, you are going to learn about how to acknowledge the personhood of all things, which is the ethic of animism, of shifting from rationality to love. And then we're going to move into part 3, which is prioritizing creativity as normality in body, mind, spirit, and heart. So good things to come. I'm going to give you the first of 2 aligned actions from this video, which is specifically about the 2 lists that I gave you. So what you're going to do, what I invite you to do between now and the next video, which will be probably a few days in between instead of a whole week, I invite you to select 3 things from either of the lists that I read out to you and implement them into your week starting now. And this can go over, right? This can continue even after the second part of this video is out. But pick 3, try them out in your week, and after the week and only after the week. If you like them, stick with them. If you don't like them, pick another 3. Try that for a week. Give a fair trial to the things by giving it a week, okay? And that is your aligned action. So technically it's over 2 weeks where you try 1 3, then you try another 3. But ultimately it is an invitation for that just to become part of your day, part of your way that you live. So may you do that. Okay. So that is the aligned action for this part of the video. I am going to love you and leave you now. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me as we've explored already many ways to live the magic in the mundane. I am super excited to take you through the second part, which I will be getting into right now, but I'm going to give it to you in a few days. So there's time to digest this first part. Okay, my friends, sending you lots of love and gratitude for being here. A friendly reminder to reach out if you're ever looking for one-to-one support within your own journey of living in alignment with your heart, with your soul, with authenticity, weaving with the tools of embodied art, with animism, and the psycho-spiritual self-work that I am super interested in and passionate about. So all those details are below. And if you found this video useful already, give it a like for me. It helps with the algorithm land. And leave a comment. I like to read them and respond with you and say, hey. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Send this to your people if you feel like they will benefit from it. It's amazing to also be a useful human who has cool resources. I love being that person. So may you do that too. and I will see you very soon in the part 2 of this video about how to live the magic in the